You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky's famous words about hockey are often repurposed when talking about risk, which is exactly what today's guest and I are talking about on the Accidental Badass podcast. Hi, I'm Erin Hallstrom, and I am an accidental badass. In this episode, I'm talking with Mark, a risk-taking badass. In this episode, we talk about the risks he's taken and how they've panned out for him. We also discuss risk aversion and why so many people are afraid to take even the smallest risks. We end the episode with lessons learned and advice that you won't want to miss. Enjoy the episode. Hey there, Mark. Welcome to the Accidental Badass podcast.
Well, thank you, Erin. I love the intro music you have. Makes me feel like a badass.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to have you on. I think what you have done, I think what you've done is fantastic, and we're going to get into what it is that you've done and what makes you this accidental badass today on the episode. But first, let's dig into your story a little bit and start with the basics. Who are you? Where are you from? Kids, family, whatever you feel comfortable sharing with the accidental badass audience.
All right. Well, thank you, Erin, and thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be on your show. Makes me feel like a badass, and I'm just honored to tell my story and hopefully help other people out there. So my name's Mark Avignoni. I'm 39 years old, not quite 40, which I'm sort of fearing, but it'll be okay. I've been married now for almost 10 years to my beautiful wife, Tracy, and my two beautiful children I have, Haley, who's almost 7, and Kayla, who is 3 years old. They keep me on my toes and make me laugh every day, which is great. I also own a few small businesses currently, and that keeps me very busy and jumping around a lot with the different things I'm doing. And just a little more about me. In my free time, you might find me outside. I love nature. I love going running or rollerblading, or you may even find me playing pickleball outside, which is a lot of fun. And I'm also in 2 Toastmasters clubs. I've been in Toastmasters now for about 15 years, actually. And my improv Toastmasters group is how I met you, and this is how we connected to do this podcast, which I'm excited about.
Yeah. We are some very funny people, you and I are. Very much so. I'm very lucky and grateful that I was able to meet you, and that it was the Toasties, as I call it, brought us together. So
That's right.
one of the things you mentioned, the small businesses, that is something I've always been in awe of, and it's what really sticks out to me. And through the years that I've known you, you have been like a chameleon when it comes to pursuing your passions. At your root, you're an entrepreneur. So what are some of these businesses that you've pursued, the small businesses, but just businesses in general that you've pursued?
Well, thanks for asking that, Erin. My main business is being a ticket broker. So I buy and sell tickets to concerts and sporting events. I've been doing that for over 15 years now, and that's what I would say is my bread and butter that pays the bills. And then besides that, over the years, I got into real estate investing. I am on my second project currently, in which I buy and try to resell houses. And currently I'm renting a house out instead of selling it, which I could get into more details later on. And I've started working in the board game industry with a card game a friend invented. So I've been doing that for a few years now. And then finally, I started a gator business during this COVID pandemic. and that hasn't been doing so well. And I could definitely get into more details about how I got started in that and how that's going. And there's other things I do besides that are smaller, and I do some crypto trading on the side. And I originally started with a video business, and that didn't pan out so well. But luckily, that's what got me out of my 9-to-5 job. So I'm happy that I'm doing my own businesses, and I'm happy that I don't have to work for anyone else. So that's a great thing. And the plus side is I don't have a commute. I don't have to drive to the city and then drive home. So that gives me a lot more free time, I feel.
Yes. As someone who works from home constantly now, I can understand and empathize.
Yes.
Yes. I get that. The little lack of commute definitely is a plus. So of all the things that you've worked on and of these businesses, which have been your favorites? I've seen some of the gators that you've done. Feel free to talk about the ones that you've done, especially what has been your favorites?
Well, my favorite business is probably doing the tickets, in which I buy and resell the tickets. And really, that's my favorite because it pays the bills, and I wouldn't be able to own my own businesses if I didn't have that as my main business. And then besides that, my second favorite business has been the card game business, which is the board game. My friend invented a card game in which I've been trying to help him get it to market. And what's so fun about that is I just get to play a lot of fun board games, and I've met a lot of fun and nice people in the industry. I've gone to expos, and it's just fun to find new games that I like to play and then share those games with my friends. So that's probably my favorite business, even though it doesn't pay any bills, so to speak.
You know what? This podcast is the same way for me. It doesn't pay any bills. It actually costs more money than it brings in, but it's a passion, and it's that kind of passion that you do because you love it, not because it's generating income for you. So I can appreciate that. So you mentioned when we were talking about some of the small businesses you run, you mentioned a couple of them where you could dig in a little more. I think the Gators is one, and maybe the flipping, or do you care to dive deeper with those?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me start with the real estate business, since I've been doing that for a few years now. And I'm just buying and selling properties, which I thought would be a good venture. And I've learned a couple lessons doing that. Well, I have 2 homes now. And my first home I ended up reselling, made a really small profit on. And then the second home, which is in Elmhurst, I currently still have, but I'm renting it out as an Airbnb. And the reason for that is because I wasn't able to sell that property. And I was actually underwater on that property, and I didn't know what to do, either sell it for a loss or I came up with the idea to turn it into an Airbnb to see if I could recoup my money that way. And running it as an Airbnb has been great so far. I've been doing that for a little over a year. And I'm so happy I decided to do that because it's definitely better off now than it was 2 years ago. And with the upturn in the housing market, I'm really sitting in a good position holding that home still. So I have a couple exit options. I could continue to rent it out as an Airbnb, or I could also try to resell it at some point. But the problem with that house is I bought it on a very busy street in Elmhurst, and I will stand on my sidewalk on that street, and trucks will just barrel down the street. And I am a little nervous because people just don't want to be on a busy street like that. So that's one of my lessons I learned, is never buy a house on a busy street. So that really is what turned me into not only a real estate investor, but a property manager, because keeping up with an Airbnb 24/7 is a lot of work, and trying to manage everyone coming in and staying. And I even find myself being a cleaning person every so often and trying to clean the house between stays. So it's a humbling experience, and it's a great thing because it's paying more bills, especially since I'm not really doing the ticket business right now because of COVID. There, of course, aren't any concerts or sporting events really taking place. So luckily, I have the property that's bringing in some cash flow. Otherwise, I would be kind of out of luck right now. And then I wanted to briefly talk about the gator business. And that, if you don't know what gators are, they go around your neck and you lift them up like a mask. And I came up with this idea during COVID. I loved wearing gators, and I'm like, maybe I could get into that business and start reselling them. So I had 8 different gators made, all original designs. And then right when I ordered the gators, a CDC article came out saying that people shouldn't wear gators. So that's what really just killed my business. It never took off, the gator business. I have a few sales here and there. It wasn't a huge investment for me, but it was more of an emotional investment because I put a lot of time and effort into it. And what it really came down to was that article really hurt me. But then right after that article, the New York Times published an article debunking that CDC article. And the New York Times said that gators do work. But at that point, it was just too late. And it was also too competitive of a space. And there were just too many people out there. By the time I got my masks in, everyone already had a mask. So it just wasn't a great business idea, and it's one that didn't really take off for me.
Got it. I hear you that on the gators, I made mask chains. So like
that's right.
Chains
I remember
that you could attach if you wore like the masks with the ear loops. And I did that, and it just seemed like a great idea. I made them for me, got a lot of compliments. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go invest some money. I'm going to go hit up every craft store I can find in a 20-mile radius and buy all the feeding and stuff like that. And then, I sold about 10 or 12 of them. And then after that, it kind of, I want to say it fell on deaf ears, but it just ceased being like this new fandangled thing. And
right.
Thankfully I'm a crafty person, so the stuff that I have, the supplies won't go to waste, and I can use it for other things. Also just could basically have a mask chain for every day of the week if I wanted to, but
yeah.
Yeah, so I hear you on that.
Yeah, I find it just hard to sell stuff in general to people, and I don't want to be too pushy of a person. And like you said, I actually have a whole garage full of masks now, so I could grab a mask whenever I need one.
Yeah, you could probably wear a fresh one every day of the week.
That's
for
right.
An indeterminate amount of time. Yes.
Yes.
Something that really impresses me about you is you make taking risks or doing these things, you make it look effortless. Like, I know, myself included, and I think this is why I think you are such a badass, that a lot of people would be scared or nervous to go out on a limb and try like the real estate thing, or, hey, I have an idea for gators. I'm going to order this, or I'm going to do this maybe non-traditional 9-to-5 thing. And a lot of people would be afraid to take that risk, but you make it look effortless. Like, oh yeah, well, just have an idea and I make it work. Are you scared of the risks? Do you find yourself like petrified, scared, nervous about some of the risks you take, or where do you stand on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I used to be a lot more scared of the risks I took. I still am to an extent. It's hard. It's scary taking risks. I've run into a lot of people that just aren't big risk takers, and I could see their point of view, and their comfort level is just not to be too risky and to live more of a comfortable life. But I, on the other hand, just try to strive for more, and I understand that risking, if you don't risk something, you may not get the benefit from it. For an example, back in high school, I remember making wagers on sports games. I used to have a bookie, and I would lose $10 bets, and I just couldn't believe it. And I would think, oh, man, I'm out $10 on this bet. I can't afford it. I don't know what to do. How am I going to make this money up? And now looking back on that, I just can't believe I was at that point where I was so scared of taking risks. But it was those small examples and those small things I did that gave me the courage to take the risks, I feel. And there's that saying, don't risk more than you can afford to lose. And that's kind of what I've took and incorporated in my life, is I just don't risk more than I can afford to lose. And if I do lose, it's not the end of the world, because it's not more than I can afford to lose. So that's my little bit of advice, is just try not to invest or risk too much money. And when I take a risk, I try to take calculated risks that have a good chance of paying off. Better than 50% is how I put it. So if people take more calculated risks, I feel you're going to win more than you're going to lose.
Well, and to quote the great Wayne Gretzky, and a quote that I know you and I are both fond of, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you'll never know the potential positives that can happen if you're not willing to even take the risk in the first place. No matter if you're talking about like a career, monetary, or shoot, even if it's, walking up to someone or something, or asking for a thing, or doing the thing that scares you, you'll miss the opportunity if you don't even get up and try. Like, you won't even know that you can be great at something if you don't even give it a try in the first place. And it sounds like what you've done is you've tried. You've assessed if I fall on my face, I won't die from this. If X, Y, or Z happens, it won't be the worst thing ever. So you don't you also, from what it sounds like, also don't oh yeah, you know what? I don't care. Health be darned. I don't care what happens. No, you're very calculated on my health isn't at risk. My livelihood, my family's well-being isn't at risk, so I'm going to give this a shot. Would you say that's fairly accurate?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, if you don't take the shot, you're never going to score, and you just got to try, just like you said, because if you don't try, it's better to try and fail than to never have tried at all. That pretty much sums up that quote, I feel.
Yeah. Man, we are deep thinkers on this episode.
Yes.
So speaking of deep thinking, and I'm going to have you put on you're not really a psychologist, but I'm going to have you pretend like you are for one.
Okay.
Being someone that does take risks and being surrounded by people who don't often take them, I don't know the ratio of being surrounded by them, but I'm curious, why, in your opinion, or from your own observations, do you think people tend to hesitate when it comes to taking risks?
Well, you've kind of hinted at it earlier, and you asked me the question of if I'm scared, and that's really what it comes down to. I think it's all about fear, and there's a lot of fear in losing either your money and or your time, and people just don't want to take that risk. And I think part of it comes down to what type of person you are. and what kind of characteristics you have, because I've just come across so many people that are just afraid to put a little bit of money in to earn that extra return. Some people just want to play it safe, I've come to realize, and that's okay. That's what they chose to do, and I'm not going to judge anyone for that. And people are happy playing it safe, but I kind of strive for more, and I see that, for example, I never wanted a full-time job. I remember back in college, I was always afraid that I would have to get a full-time job because everyone got a full-time job. So I just accepted that I would get a full-time job, I would do the 9-to-5 thing, but I knew deep down I really didn't want to do that. And sure enough, I got a 9-to-5 job out of college. And by doing that 9-to-5 job, it reinforced that I did not want to have a 9-to-5 job. So after about a year of that, I decided to call it quits. I was still living at home with my parents, and that's when I decided to start a video business. And I started videoing weddings and such and doing montages. And then I realized I really didn't want to do that either. But that gave me the flexibility because I was already started my own business to do other ventures. And that's where the ticket business came into play. I was always doing some ticket stuff on the side, even when I was working my 9-to-5 job. And I realized that selling tickets was a great way to make extra money. So I kept buying more and more tickets, and I kept making more and more money. And that's when I realized that I don't need the video business. It was just too much work. I figured I would just start a ticket company, and I've been doing that ever since up until COVID happened. But ironically enough, it seems like concerts are starting to come back now. And I just noticed within the past week or two that events are starting to pick up. So I'm starting to get my feet wet again and starting to buy a few tickets here and there. And hopefully that will, hopefully we'll be back to normal sooner rather than later. And then I could just get back to my gig, so to speak.
Yes. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Are there any risks you wish you would have taken but didn't?
Yeah, that's a good question. Going back to maybe college, I kind of wish I had went away to school because I commuted to Joliet Junior College for 2 years, and then I commuted to UIC in the city for 2 years. And I just realized that maybe by going away to school, it would have given me a better grasp of living on my own and making my own decisions. So that's one of my risks, or one of the things I think I could have done that may have helped me in my career going forward. So I think about that from time to time, but I am happy that there were some benefits of commuting to school. For example, I went to UIC. I would just schedule all my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I would have most of the week off, and I would just do my own thing most of the week, which was kind of nice.
Smart.
And
so smart.
Yes. And then my other thing was I kind of wish I would have bought more stocks when I was younger, because a lot of the stocks just seemed to really skyrocket, the ones I had my eye on way back. And that's something I wish I had pulled the trigger on sooner, because I remember when Netflix was real cheap and I was just about to buy it, but I didn't really have a brokerage account, so I had to either create an account and try to buy the stock, or what I ended up doing was just sitting on the sideline while I watched the stock just soar. And same thing with the crypto space, like Bitcoins and such. I was lucky enough to buy a few things way back, but I wish I had bought a lot more. I'm sure everyone could say the same thing. And if I had just done that, I would probably be retired right now. So I guess that's another risk I didn't take.
Yeah. Well, sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Everyone's kicking themselves about that.
Yes. Yes. I would have to agree. I'm still trying to wrap my head around Bitcoin, so I'm slow to that. But I'm okay with that. I just listened to a podcast last week describing what NFTs were, and it also talked about Bitcoin and and cryptocurrency and all that stuff, and I understood it to an extent, but it was still what felt like miles over my head. So miles above me in terms of my understanding of that. Not proud of that, but whatever. So as we wrap up, I love to see if there's any takeaways for listeners that have listened to the podcast and heard us, talk about risks and your story and what you've done. What are some lessons that you have learned that, if you were going to list out, let's say 3 or 4 things, lessons that you've learned that you'd like to pass along to others, what would those be?
Sure. I've mentioned it a little earlier in the podcast about taking calculated risks, and I strongly believe that. It's like going to a casino and playing blackjack. The reason the casino makes money is because they have that less than 1% advantage. So they have like a 51% advantage, but they make money because of that 1%. So if you take a risk, I say as long as it's greater than 50%, I would almost always do that. Of course, I try to take higher calculated risks, maybe in the 75% or higher range, where I know it has a good shot of taking off. So if I lose on an investment or a business idea, I will probably make it up on one of my next 2 ventures. That's how I look at it. And just don't be afraid to lose would be another thing I want to point out. Like I was saying, if the odds are with you, that means you have an advantage and you should take it. Now, my other idea is to take your time before you start a new venture. And you just don't want to jump right into something. And I made this mistake with the gator business because I realized I didn't have much time to act, and I had to do it fairly quickly. But what I've learned is that I try to give an idea, like a business venture, maybe a good 6 months. And I just keep thinking about it in my head. And your head will tell you whether it's a good idea or not if you give it time. So you just keep thinking about it. And if after 6 months you think it's still a great business venture, I say jump in, because I've talked myself out of a lot of ventures by giving myself that time. And I'm actually, looking back, I'm so happy I did, because they weren't great ideas. And I realized that after several months of just thinking about an idea. But I knew I didn't have much time with the gator business, so I took a risk and I gave it a shot, and it just didn't really pan out for me. But it's not the end of the world, because I'll make it up on my next venture or one of the other things I'm doing. And then you just want to give yourself some time to do that research, because you may come up with the best business idea, but there might be several other companies doing the same exact thing. And that also goes back to the gator business. I didn't realize how competitive of a space that would be, but I learned my lesson on that, and it was worth trying, because if I didn't try, I wouldn't even be owning my own businesses right now. So I'm really happy to be able to work for myself and own my own businesses. And then finally, my last bit of advice is to block out the noise, is how I put it. There's always going to be naysayers out there. You're going to run a business idea past somebody, and they're going to say it's a bad idea, don't do it. And you're going to hear that a lot. So what I say is block out the noise. Some people I should say, may not want you to succeed, or they may not be a risk taker, and they may not understand that by taking a risk, you're going to make that money or you're going to succeed. So you maybe don't tell too many people about your idea, or tell trusted friends who support you, but you also want to block out that noise. But on the flip side, there are going to be those naysayers, and that's where you're just going to want the time to think about an idea. And that's where the 6 months come into play. So give yourself that time to just keep thinking about an idea, and I always say that your mind is going to tell you whether to do it or not. So those are probably my handful of tips I would pass along to someone who's either thinking about starting their own business or thinking about investing in something. And I hope that resonates with people, because those are the tips I've learned throughout my several years of owning small businesses. And that's really what's gotten me to where I'm at now.
Well, thank you so much. Those are some pretty important and impressive lessons that you've learned. And I agree. I hope people listening that are contemplating maybe starting a business, maybe branching off onto their own, I hope that inspires them to do just that. Mark, thank you so much for joining me today on the Accidental Badass podcast. It was great to have you on.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have told my story, and thank you for having me, and I hope I can hear a lot more podcasts to come, because you got a great show, Aaron.